I still remember the feeling. It was like the floor dropped out from under me, and I was just falling. One minute, I was reheating leftover pasta, just a regular Tuesday evening, and the next, my entire marriage, my whole world, was revealed as a meticulously crafted lie. Everything I thought I knew about Sophia, about us, shattered in less than a minute. My name is Ethan, and what I heard that night wasn't just a conversation, it was a blueprint for my financial destruction, whispered in voices that were chillingly familiar. This isn't just a story about a phone call, it's about the devastating realization that sometimes, the person you trust most can be your greatest deceiver. It started innocently enough. Sophia called me around 7, her voice warm and sweet, talking about dinner and reminding me about a prescription she needed. We chatted for maybe 15 minutes, the kind of comfortable, routine conversation married couples have 1,000 times. She told me she was heading to her parents' house to help her mom, Carol, with something. She'd probably stay for dinner, she said, and call me back later. Her exact words were etched into my memory. I'm pulling up to Mom and Dad's place now. Going to catch up with the family. I'll call you back in a bit. Love you. Then the line went quiet. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and turned back to my pasta. That's when I heard it, a faint background noise coming from the phone. I figured it was just that slight lag before a call fully disconnects. But then, I heard laughter. Clear. Distinct. And I realized the call was still connected. Sophia hadn't hung up. My hand froze, halfway to the microwave. Slowly, almost mechanically, I picked up the phone and pressed it to my ear. And that's when my world began to crumble. Her voice came through crystal clear, but it was different now. Animated. Excited. In a way I hadn't heard in months. She was saying how good it felt to finally discuss this openly with them. Then Chloe, Sophia's sister, cut straight to the point, asking when she was actually going to leave me. My stomach dropped. Just like that. No build-up. No context needed. They were already deep in a conversation about ending my marriage. Sophia actually laughed before she started talking about timing and strategy. Her mother, Carol, jumped in with this practical, almost cold tone, saying, 3 years of marriage should be enough to establish everything she needs legally. I stood there in my kitchen, the pasta long forgotten, my phone pressed so hard against my ear it hurt. I was listening to my wife discuss our marriage like it was a business transaction she was planning to dissolve. But it got worse. So much worse. Chloe brought up someone named Blake, asking if he was still in the picture. The pause before Sophia answered felt like an eternity. When she finally spoke, she described him as everything I wasn't: successful, ambitious, someone who actually takes risks. The way she said my name, like it tasted bitter, like I was just some unfortunate obstacle she had to navigate around. I grabbed the edge of the counter, just to steady myself. Carol's voice came next, calculated and rehearsed, warning Sophia that I shouldn't suspect anything until she was ready, that men like him get vindictive when their ego is hurt, and that she needed to secure her position first. They weren't just talking about leaving. They were strategizing. Planning. Coordinating. This wasn't a sudden decision or an emotional affair. This was methodical. Sophia continued, describing me as safe and stable, but boring. Someone who never wants to do anything exciting, always worried about the budget, always playing it safe. She said she couldn't live like this forever. Chloe then brought up Blake's penthouse in downtown Chicago, the one overlooking the river. I knew that building. Condos there started at $2 million. Sophia talked about moving in with him after everything was finalized, about some trip to Vail he was planning, comparing it to my idea of fun, which apparently was just camping in national forests in Montana to save money. They all laughed at that, a shared joke at my expense. I thought about our camping trips, how Sophia had always said she loved them, loved being away from the city, unplugged and together. Another lie. Carol steered the conversation back to practical matters, asking about lawyers and asset division. My blood ran cold. Sophia explained she'd been documenting everything: my income, our accounts, the house. She said she knew exactly what she was entitled to, and she said it with such satisfaction, like she was proud of herself for being thorough. Then she dropped the real bomb. She started talking about timing and my trust fund distribution. The timing matters because of his trust fund distribution. If I wait until after June, it becomes marital property. His financial advisor explained the whole structure to him last year, and I was sitting right there taking mental notes. She had been planning this for over a year. Sitting next to me. Smiling. Playing the loving wife while calculating exactly how to maximize her take. When she stepped away for a moment, Carol asked about proof of the affair, worried it might hurt Sophia in court. Sophia's response was quick, confident. She explained how she and Blake had been careful. No texts. No emails. Nothing traceable. They only met at his friend Owen's lake house, a place I didn't even know existed, as far as anyone could prove. She was just a wife who grew apart from her husband. The casual way she discussed covering her tracks, the pride in her voice at being clever, it made me nauseous. Chloe praised her for thinking everything through. Sophia responded by saying she had to be smart about it, that I might be boring, but I wasn't stupid, so she needed to be smarter. Carol's voice took on this warmer tone, telling Sophia they were proud of her for choosing herself, that she deserved someone who matched her energy and ambition. She called me a good man, but said I was holding Sophia back. That's what 3 years of marriage had been reduced to in their eyes. I heard movement, chairs scraping, and then Sophia's voice suddenly changed, sharp with panic, asking, "Did I hang up on him?" My heart stopped. There was fumbling, rushed whispers I couldn't make out, and then pure fear in her voice as she realized the call was still connected. I didn't wait to hear more. I ended the call myself, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The apartment was completely silent except for my own ragged breathing. My phone started ringing immediately. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, watching it ring until it went to voicemail. It rang again. And again. I turned the phone face down and walked to my bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and just tried to understand what had just happened. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd trusted with everything, had been systematically planning to destroy me financially while carrying on an affair with some rich guy named Blake. Her entire family was in on it, coaching her, advising her, celebrating her deception. And I had heard every single word. My phone didn't stop ringing for 3 hours straight. Sophia called 47 times that night. I know because I counted every single one while sitting in the dark of my bedroom, watching her name light up the screen over and over. The calls were relentless. Desperate. I ignored every single one. Around midnight, the calls stopped, and the texts started flooding in. At first, they were panicked, asking if I was okay, saying we needed to talk, claiming there was an explanation. Then they shifted to defensive, saying I misunderstood, that I only heard part of the conversation, that things sounded worse than they were. By 2 a.m, the tone changed completely. She was angry now, accusing me of eavesdropping, saying I had no right to listen to a private family conversation. Turning this whole thing around like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I read every message but didn't respond to a single one. Instead, my mind was racing through everything, replaying that conversation, but also going further back, connecting dots I'd been too blind to see before. The late-night work meetings that started about 8 months ago. Her new interest in yoga classes every Tuesday and Thursday evening. The way she'd started dressing differently, buying expensive clothes, she said, were for client meetings at her marketing job. Her sudden fascination with cryptocurrency and investment strategies, subjects she'd never cared about before. The questions about my finances that I'd thought were just her being interested in our future together. She'd ask about my trust funds so casually, like she was just curious, wanting to understand how it worked. I'd explained everything to her because that's what married couples do. They share information. They plan together. I told her about the structure my grandfather had set up, about the distributions, about the timeline, and she'd sat there nodding, asking follow-up questions, playing the supportive wife, while taking mental notes on exactly how to maximize her take. I thought about the financial advisor meeting last June, where she'd come along, saying she wanted to be more involved in our financial planning. I'd been so happy she was taking interest. Now I realized she'd been gathering intelligence. The sun came up, and I hadn't slept at all. I made coffee and did something I should have done months ago. I started going through our shared credit card statements. The charges were there, hidden in plain sight because I trusted her. Restaurants in neighborhoods she never mentioned visiting. Hotel charges on nights she said she was at work conferences. A jewelry purchase for $2,000 that I'd never seen her wear. Gas station charges near an address 2 hours outside the city. I pulled up property records online and found it. A lake house registered to someone named Owen. And a quick social media search showed me Owen was Blake's college roommate. Everything was falling into place like a nightmare puzzle. I called my bank and requested detailed statements for the past year. Then I did something that felt surreal but necessary. I called a divorce lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the best one in Chicago, someone my colleague had used 2 years ago. Her name was Victoria, and she had a reputation for being ruthless. Her secretary said she could see me that afternoon. I spent the morning documenting everything. I wrote down every detail I remembered from that phone call. I downloaded all our financial records. I took screenshots of every suspicious charge. I backed everything up to 3 different locations. At one point, Sophia tried to come home. I heard her key in the lock around 9 in the morning, but I'd already changed the deadbolt. She knocked, then pounded, then started crying through the door, begging me to let her explain. I stood on the other side in complete silence until she finally left. Meeting Victoria was like talking to someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out 1,000 times. She barely reacted as I explained everything, just took notes and asked pointed questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and asked me the critical question: how much of my assets were actually vulnerable in a divorce? That's when I explained the full structure of my inheritance. My grandfather hadn't just set up a trust fund, he'd created an ironclad asset protection trust that distributed funds to me, but the principal remained protected. The house Sophia and I lived in? I bought it before we got married with trust money, and it was titled in the trust's name, not mine personally. My investment accounts? Same thing, structured through the trust. Victoria actually smiled. The first time I'd seen any emotion from her. She explained that while Sophia had been planning to take me for everything, she'd fundamentally misunderstood what was actually available. The only marital assets were my salary from the past 3 years and our joint checking account, which had maybe $30,000 in it. Everything else was protected. Untouchable. Secured long before Sophia had ever entered the picture. My grandfather had been a corporate attorney himself. He'd seen plenty of messy divorces, and he'd made sure his grandchildren would never be vulnerable to exactly what Sophia was attempting. Victoria asked if I had proof of the affair. I told her about the phone call. Most phones automatically save call logs, and some even save recordings if you have certain apps installed. I checked my phone, and there it was. The entire conversation backed up automatically to my cloud storage. Victoria's expression shifted from professional to something almost predatory. She explained that in our state, fault still mattered in divorce proceedings. Adultery, especially when combined with evidence of financial planning and conspiracy with family members, would destroy any claim Sophia might have to alimony. Even that $30,000 in our joint account could potentially be protected if we proved she'd acted in bad faith throughout the marriage. We spent 2 hours mapping out strategy. Victoria would file for divorce immediately, before Sophia had a chance to make her move. We'd include the affair, the conspiracy, everything. We'd request an emergency hearing for asset protection based on her demonstrated intent to defraud. Victoria said she'd have the papers drawn up by end of business the next day. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt since that phone call, a sense of control. When I got home, there were 20 more missed calls from Sophia, but there were also calls from Carol and Chloe. Her family was mobilizing, trying to control the damage. I blocked all their numbers. That evening, I did something therapeutic. I went through the apartment and removed every photo of Sophia, every gift she'd given me, every reminder of what I'd thought our marriage was. I packed it all into boxes and left them by the door. 3 years of my life reduced to 4 cardboard boxes. My phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Sophia, calling from someone else's phone. Her voice smaller now, scared, begging to talk like adults, saying I couldn't just shut her out. I'd stayed silent for 2 days, but now I spoke, my voice calm and cold, telling her I'd heard everything. Every single word she'd said to her family. There was silence on the other end. Then her voice cracked, claiming it wasn't what it sounded like, that she was just venting, didn't mean any of it. I pointed out she'd laid out a timeline, discussed asset division, talked about her boyfriend's penthouse. She started crying, really sobbing now, saying she'd made a mistake, was confused, that her family was putting pressure on her, that Blake didn't mean anything. But I was done listening to lies. You said I was boring, safe, someone you couldn't live with forever, I told her. You know what, Sophia? You were right. You can't live with me. Not anymore. I hung up and blocked that number, too. The papers would be served the next day. My lawyer was ready. My assets were protected. And for the first time since that phone call, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The process server delivered the divorce papers to Sophia at her office on a Friday afternoon. Victoria called me 20 minutes later to confirm it was done, and then my phone exploded with messages from blocked numbers, angry voicemails from Carol, frantic texts from Chloe using different phones, and one particularly unhinged message from Sophia's father, who I'd barely spoken to in 3 years, suddenly very concerned about his daughter's well-being. I didn't respond to any of them. The silence was my weapon now, and I was learning to use it effectively. What I hadn't expected was how quickly Sophia's confidence would crumble once she realized I wasn't going to be the safe, predictable Ethan she'd been counting on. Her first move was playing victim on social media, posting vague messages about betrayal and heartbreak, carefully worded to make it seem like I was the one who'd done something wrong. Her friends flooded the comments with support, telling her she deserved better, that she was strong and would get through this. I watched it all from my account without reacting, knowing the truth would come out soon enough. Her second move was more calculated. She hired a lawyer, some aggressive guy named Patrick, who had a reputation for taking vindictive spouses to the cleaners. Victoria actually laughed when she found out who Sophia had chosen. Apparently, Patrick was known for taking cases he couldn't win if the client was willing to pay his ridiculous retainer. Sophia had probably dropped $10,000 just to get him to look at her case. The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks out. But Patrick started making noise immediately, filing motions for emergency spousal support, claiming Sophia was financially dependent on me and couldn't maintain her lifestyle without immediate assistance. Victoria responded by filing our own motion, requesting an emergency order to freeze all joint assets based on Sophia's demonstrated intent to defraud, attaching excerpts from the phone call recording as evidence. I wasn't prepared for how that recording would detonate Sophia's entire strategy. Patrick apparently hadn't been told about the phone call. Sophia had conveniently left that detail out when she hired him. When Victoria submitted the transcript along with the audio file, Patrick tried to get it excluded, arguing it was obtained illegally, but the judge shut that down immediately. The call had been made to my phone. I had every right to listen to it, and the fact that Sophia forgot to hang up didn't make it inadmissible. The judge listened to a portion of the recording in chambers and came back with an expression that told me everything I needed to know. Emergency spousal support was denied. Joint assets were frozen pending a full hearing, and the judge strongly suggested both parties attempt mediation before wasting the court's time. That's when things got really ugly. Sophia showed up at my apartment one night, drunk and screaming through the door about how I'd ruined her life, how Blake had dumped her the second he found out about the divorce and the frozen assets, how her family was furious with her for being careless. I recorded every word through my phone while standing silently inside. Another piece of evidence for the growing file. She eventually left when a neighbor threatened to call the cops. The mediation was a disaster from the start. We sat in a conference room, Sophia on one side with Patrick, me on the other with Victoria, and a mediator named Diane trying to find common ground that didn't exist. Sophia couldn't even look at me. Her eyes were red from crying, and she'd lost weight. Looked like she hadn't slept in days. Part of me felt bad for her, but then I remembered her laughing with her family about how boring and predictable I was, and that sympathy evaporated instantly. Patrick started with demands that were absolutely delusional. 50% of all assets, including the trust, alimony for 5 years, and half the value of my future trust distributions. Victoria didn't even dignify it with a response. She just slid a folder across the table containing a complete breakdown of what was actually marital property versus protected assets. Patrick's face went red as he read through it, clearly realizing his client had either lied to him or genuinely didn't understand what she'd gotten herself into. The mediator asked Sophia directly if she wanted to address the affair. That's when Sophia finally looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine fear. She started talking, her voice shaking, trying to explain that Blake had pursued her, that she'd been vulnerable, that I'd been working so much, and she felt neglected. She claimed the conversation with her family was taken out of context, that she was just venting frustrations, that she never actually intended to go through with any of it. Victoria let her talk, didn't interrupt, just took notes with this slight smile that made Patrick visibly uncomfortable. When Sophia finished, Victoria calmly pointed out that if she never intended to go through with it, there was no logical explanation for why she'd been documenting my financial information for over a year. Sophia had no answer for that. The room went silent. Patrick's expression changed. He knew his case was dead. The mediation ended with no agreement, which meant we were heading to trial. Patrick pulled Victoria aside afterward, and I could see him trying to negotiate, probably realizing his $10,000 retainer was about to turn into a $50,000 loss when Sophia couldn't pay him. After the judgment, Victoria came back to me and explained they'd offered a deal. Sophia would accept a clean break, no alimony, no claim to any assets beyond her personal belongings, in exchange for me not pursuing her for the cost of the divorce or any civil action for fraud. I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. 2 months ago, I would have agonized over a decision like this. Would have tried to find a compromise that made everyone happy. But that Ethan was gone, killed by a phone call that showed me exactly what my marriage had really been. I told Victoria to accept the deal, not because I felt generous, but because I wanted this finished. I wanted Sophia out of my life completely. No ongoing legal battles, no future contact, nothing. The final hearing was almost anticlimactic. The judge reviewed the settlement agreement, asked Sophia if she understood she was giving up any claim to my assets, asked me if I agreed to the terms. We both said yes without looking at each other. The judge signed the order, and just like that, 3 years of marriage were dissolved. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in months. Sophia left through a different exit. I saw her in the parking lot getting into Carol's car, probably going back to her parents' house since she'd moved out of our apartment weeks earlier. I never saw her again after that day. I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved to Nashville about 6 months later, trying to start over somewhere fresh. Blake had apparently moved on immediately, was already dating someone new before the divorce was even final. Sophia's social media went dark. No more posts about her fabulous life. No more carefully curated photos. She just disappeared. As for me, I sold the apartment. Too many memories in those walls. I bought a smaller place downtown Chicago, something that was just mine. No ghosts. No history. I threw myself into work, got a promotion, started traveling more. I went on a few dates, but nothing serious. I wasn't ready to trust someone like that again. The whole experience changed me in ways I'm still processing. I learned that the person you think you know best can be a complete stranger. I learned that silence can be more powerful than words. I learned that sometimes the universe does you a favor by exposing the truth, even when that truth destroys everything you thought you had. People ask me sometimes if I'm glad that phone call stayed connected, if I'm grateful I overheard what I did. The answer is complicated. Part of me wishes I'd never heard it. Wishes I could have stayed in that ignorant happiness a little longer. But the larger part, the part that's learning to be okay again, knows that conversation saved me from years of being used by someone who saw me as nothing more than a financial safety net. The most painful part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was hearing who I really was to her when she thought I couldn't hear. That's what still hits me sometimes late at night. The casual cruelty in her voice, the ease with which she dismissed 3 years of marriage, the laughter when her family mocked the life we'd built together. But I survived it. And more than that, I protected myself. That phone call showed me the truth. And the truth, as brutal as it was, set me free. What would you have done in my shoes?